Maya, stay with me. My phone slid out of my hand and smacked against the apartment floor. I couldn't pull air into my lungs. My whole body felt cold, like something inside me had burst open. And the worst part, the hospital bracelet was still wrapped around my wrist. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell for updates. Just 6 hours earlier, they'd told me I was fine. I dragged myself across the hallway carpet, trying to reach the kitchen counter to stand up again, but my arm gave out. A sharp pain ripped through my stomach so hard I screamed. My screen lit up beside me. New test results available. I stared at the notification through blurry vision. What test results? I whispered. Because they barely tested me at all. Earlier that afternoon, I'd walked into the ER bent over so badly I couldn't straighten my back. I remember gripping the reception desk while people in the waiting room kept staring at me. The nurse never even looked up from her computer. Pain levels. 9, I said, maybe 10, it's getting worse. Any anxiety history? I blinked at her. What? I almost fainted in class. She typed something without reacting. By the time they called me back, I was shaking. A resident checked my blood pressure, asked a few questions, then left. 10 minutes later, Dr. Evan Mercer walked in holding a tablet. He didn't introduce himself. He barely touched my abdomen before stepping back. You're probably dehydrated, he said. Stress can hit people pretty hard during finals. I stared at him. I know what stress feels like, this isn't stress. How many hours are you sleeping? That's not. And you work nights too, right? I noticed the shift immediately. The second he heard college student and night shifts, his entire tone changed. Like he'd already decided what kind of patient I was. I tried standing from the bed and nearly collapsed. I can barely walk, I told him. If this were serious, he said calmly, your vitals would reflect it. No scan. Barely any blood work. A discharge packet printed less than 20 minutes later. While another patient got rushed past me in a wheelchair by 2 nurses, I sat in the waiting area struggling just to put my shoes back on. Outside, Jenna pulled the car up hard against the curb. What did they do? She asked the second she saw me. They said I'm okay. Her face twisted. Maya, you can't even stand up. I don't want to go back in there. You're not making a scene by asking for help. But I already felt embarrassed, weak, dramatic, exactly how they looked at me the entire visit. So I told her to just take me home. Hours later, I collapsed before I even made it to my bedroom. And while I lay there unable to move, my phone lit up again. New test results available. Then my apartment door burst open. And Jenna started screaming. Muffled voices drifted through the darkness before I could finally open my eyes. Blood pressures stabilizing. Good, keep monitoring her. Everything smelled sterile, my throat burned. When I tried lifting my arm, something tugged against my skin. An IV. I turned my head slowly and saw Jenna sitting beside the bed in wrinkled clothes, mascara smeared under her eyes. The second she noticed I was awake, she shot upright. Oh my God. Her voice cracked. You scared the hell out of me. I tried speaking but my throat was dry. What happened? Jenna looked down for a second before answering. The paramedics found internal bleeding. They said a cyst ruptured. She swallowed hard. They had to operate right away. A doctor entered moments later and explained it more clinically. You lost a dangerous amount of blood. Another few hours could have changed the outcome. Could have changed the outcome. The words sat in my chest heavier than the pain itself. Because I had already asked for help. Twice. Later that afternoon, my mom arrived carrying a coffee she never drank. She hugged me carefully, then sat beside the bed rubbing her hands together. What exactly did you tell them at the ER? I frowned. Everything. I'm just asking if maybe, she hesitated, maybe they didn't understand how serious it felt. Jenna immediately looked up from the chair. She could barely stand. I know, my mom said quietly, but doctors don't usually send someone home if. If what? Jenna snapped. If they're actually dying. The room went silent. After my mom stepped out, I kept replaying Mercer's voice in my head. Stress, anxiety, finals. The way he'd interrupted me every time I tried explaining the pain. For the first time, I started wondering if maybe I really had sounded dramatic. Until Jenna opened my patient portal on her phone. Look at this. She handed me the screen. My discharge summary read. Patient declined recommended imaging due to financial concerns. I sat upright so fast the monitor wires pulled against my chest. What? Another note underneath said. Patient discharged ambulatory and in stable condition. She's lying, I whispered. Jenna stared at me. You asked them if you needed a scan. I never refused anything. You literally couldn't walk to the car. She started recording on her phone while I read the notes out loud, almost like she already knew nobody would believe how ridiculous they sounded later. Then I noticed something strange in the digital timeline. One entry jumped forward several minutes. A blank gap sat between two timestamps like something had been removed. I zoomed in closer. What is that? Jenna leaned toward the screen. A long silence passed. Then she whispered, Maya, somebody changed this after you left. I didn't plan on posting anything publicly. At first, I just wanted answers. But 3 days after leaving the ICU, I uploaded a short video showing two things side by side. A picture of me hooked to monitors in intensive care, and the discharge paperwork claiming I walked out of the stable. I collapsed hours later, I said into the camera, so how was I fine? By the next morning, the video had spread across local feeds. The comments got worse every hour. Same thing happened to my sister. They dismissed my chest pain as anxiety too. That doctor rushed my dad out last year. Jenna sat beside me on the couch, refreshing the page over and over. They're panicking, she muttered. Right on cue, the hospital released a statement. The patient received appropriate care based on presented symptoms. Appropriate care. I stared at the words until my jaw tightened. 2 days later, the hospital scheduled a formal patient relations meeting. The conference room felt colder than the ICU. A woman from administration smiled too carefully while arranging papers in front of her. We understand this has been emotional, she began. Then the door opened. Dr. Mercer walked in. My stomach dropped. He sat across from me completely relaxed, sleeves rolled neatly to his elbows like this was any normal workday. Maya, he said calmly, I'm glad you recovered. I said nothing. He folded his hands. Traumatic medical events can affect memory, but your chart accurately reflects our interaction. Jenna let out a sharp laugh, seriously. Mercer ignored her. You expressed concerns about cost, he continued. You declined further imaging. That's not true, I said immediately. You were medically stable upon discharge. I almost died. His expression never changed. You're interpreting events through understandable fear. For a second I felt myself shrinking again, same tone, same look, like I was emotional and irrational while he stayed composed and professional. Then Jenna pulled out her phone. You mean these? She asked. She read my texts out loud. They won't scan me. Then another. He says I'm overreacting. The room went completely still. One staff member near the corner shifted uncomfortably. Another stopped writing notes altogether. And across the table I noticed something else. The nurse from my ER visit wouldn't look at me. Not once. The meeting ended abruptly after that. As Jenna and I walked through the parking garage, footsteps echoed behind us. Wait. We turned. It was the nurse. She looked terrified. You didn't get this from me, she whispered. Before either of us could respond, she shoved a folded paper into my hand and hurried away toward the stairwell. Jenna unfolded it first. Her face drained of color. At the top was my patient ID number. Below it, possible internal hemorrhage, Recommend immediate imaging. Time-stamped hours before they discharged me. I grabbed my official records from my bag and flipped through them again frantically. The note wasn't there. Not anywhere. Jenna spread everything across the kitchen table like evidence in a crime show. My discharge paperwork. The ICU records. Screenshots from my patient portal. And now the hidden triage note. This timestamp, she said, pointing at the page, matches the gap in your chart. I stared at the numbers. She was right. The missing section in my records lined up exactly with when the nurse had flagged possible internal bleeding. Someone hadn't just ignored the warning. Someone removed it. The realization made my stomach twist harder than the surgery pain. The next morning, I met with a malpractice attorney, expecting him to politely turn me away. Instead, the second he saw the documents, his entire posture changed. "Who gave you this?" he asked carefully. "I can't say." He nodded once. "Do not lose these copies." "That bad?" He leaned back in his chair. "Maya, if records were altered after a medical emergency, this goes beyond negligence." Jenna and I exchanged a look. Then things escalated fast. That same night, I tried logging into my patient portal again. Access denied. I refreshed the page 3 times. Still locked out. Jenna immediately grabbed her laptop. Good thing I screenshotted everything. She opened a folder packed with saved records before the account disappeared. My attorney called minutes later. "If they're restricting access now," he said, "they know exposure is possible." The pressure started building from every direction after that. Anonymous messages flooded my inbox. "You're ruining careers." "Doctors make judgment calls every day." "Stop before this gets ugly." Then local news stations started emailing for interviews after screenshots of the altered records leaked online. The hospital announced Dr. Mercer was being placed on temporary leave pending review, but their statement still insisted there was no evidence of misconduct. No evidence. Even after the missing chart entries. Even after surgery saved my life hours later. Then the nurse vanished. I texted the number she'd written on the back of the note. Disconnected. 2 days later, my attorney confirmed she'd resigned. That scared me more than anything else so far. Because innocent people usually didn't disappear quietly. The biggest decision came when Channel 8 invited me onto a live evening segment. "You don't have to do this," Jenna told me backstage. I stared at my reflection under the studio lights. "Yes," I said quietly, "I do." The interview started gently enough. Then halfway through, the anchor touched her earpiece suddenly. Her expression shifted. "Maya," she said carefully, "we've just received information from a hospital insider." My chest tightened. She glanced down at the new notes in front of her. "We're being told Dr. Mercer was already under internal review over emergency room discharge speed metrics tied to executive performance bonuses." The studio went silent. I felt the entire story changing in real time. Maybe this wasn't one bad decision. Maybe I was just the case that finally exploded publicly. My phone buzzed against my leg. A text from my attorney. 3 words. "Check the attachment." The second the interview ended, I rushed backstage and opened the attachment. There were dozens of internal hospital emails. Administrative threads. Performance reports. Messages between department heads. Then I saw Dr. Mercer's name. My hands started shaking as I opened one specific email chain, dated the night I went to the ER. The subject line read: "ER throughput targets, priority cases." One administrator wrote, "Imaging overuse continues to slow discharge times." Another replied, "Asterisk, low-risk young patients should not delay bed turnover unless absolutely necessary." Then came Mercer's response. Short, direct. Cold. "Understood, will continue avoiding unnecessary scans where clinically appropriate." I kept scrolling. And then I found the email sent hours after I collapsed. My attorney had highlighted it in red. Ensure documentation reflects patient declining additional workup. I stopped breathing for a second. Jenna grabbed the phone from my hand and read it herself. Oh my God. That was it. The full truth. The nurse had correctly flagged possible internal bleeding before I was discharged. Mercer ignored the recommendation because scans would slow patient turnover during one of the hospital's busiest nights. Then after I collapsed and ended up in emergency surgery, somebody altered the records to protect the hospital from liability. I wasn't dramatic. I wasn't confused. And I hadn't imagined any of it. For the first time since that night, I cried without doubting myself. Not quiet tears. Full-body shaking sobs that left me bent forward in the chair, while Jenna held onto my shoulder. A week later, my mom sat across from me at our kitchen table, holding printed copies of the emails. She looked sick reading them. I should have believed you, she said softly. Neither of us spoke for a few seconds. Then she reached across the table and squeezed my hand. The nurse who gave me the hidden note eventually testified through my attorney. According to her, staff had been pressured for months to minimize scans during overcrowded shifts because administration obsessed over wait time numbers and discharge metrics. Once the emails leaked publicly, everything exploded. Local stations ran the story non-stop. Former patients started coming forward with their own complaints involving Mercer and rushed dismissals. One family claimed their father suffered a stroke less than a day after being discharged from the same ER. The hospital tried controlling the damage with carefully worded statements, but leaked staff messages painted a different picture entirely. Executives cared more about throughput numbers than slowing down to investigate borderline cases. Within weeks, Dr. Mercer's medical license was suspended pending investigation. Reporters waited outside his attorney's office. The same man who once sat across from me acting untouchable now avoided cameras entirely. The hospital settled my case privately while publicly denying intentional wrongdoing. But the fallout didn't stop there. More lawsuits followed. State investigators got involved. Several administrators quietly resigned before the end of the year. Months later, I finally returned to school. Physically, I healed. Emotionally, something had changed permanently. Before all this, I avoided conflict constantly. I apologized for everything. I kept convincing myself I was overreacting. Now, when people tell me something feels wrong, I listen. And I tell them to keep asking questions until someone takes them seriously. One afternoon, I drove past the same ER entrance for the first time since the collapse. I sat in the parking lot for a moment watching ambulances pull in and nurses move through the sliding doors. That night flashed through my head again, me gripping the counter barely standing while people looked past me. Only this time something was different. Before I even reached the sidewalk, a reporter recognized me. "Maya, do you have a comment about the investigation?" I looked up at the building one last time. The place that told me I was fine. The place that nearly buried the truth with my records. Then I turned and walked away without stopping. The hospital called me fine until the evidence made silence impossible.